Welcome to my Chanel. I still remember the sound of my wife's closet door sliding open. It wasn't loud. Just a soft "hey," but it echoed in my chest like a warning. Come here, Lena said, her voice calm, almost casual. I stayed where I was, standing barefoot on the cold bedroom floor, already knowing I should say no. My pulse thudded in my ears as I watched her pull something from the hanger. A pale blue blouse. Soft. Delicate. Hers. This is ridiculous, I muttered, trying to laugh it off. You've officially lost your mind. She didn't smile. That's what scared me. Put it on, she said. My mouth went dry. Lena. Just listen, she interrupted gently. One night. No jokes. No teasing. I just want you to trust me. Trust her. That word hit harder than anything else. My hands shook as I took the blouse from her. The fabric felt impossibly light, like it wasn't meant for hands like mine. I turned my back to her, breathing shallow, and pulled it over my head. The moment it settled against my skin, something strange happened. I froze. The fabric brushed my chest, slid down my sides, rested where my t-shirt never did. It didn't feel like a costume. It felt intentional. Like it was supposed to be there. Turn around, Lena said softly. I can't, I whispered. Please. I turned. The mirror caught me before her eyes did. For a split second my brain rejected what I was seeing. Broad shoulders softened by fabric. My reflection unfamiliar, wrong maybe, but not ugly. Not shameful. My breath hitched. Behind me, Lena sucked in a quiet breath. Oh, she said. Not laughing. Not mocking. Just a go. That single sound sent heat rushing through my chest, followed immediately by panic. I wasn't supposed to feel this. I looked at her, my voice barely holding together. This doesn't mean anything, I said. She met my eyes in the mirror and replied calmly. Then why are you shaking? The next morning I stood in front of my closet for nearly 10 minutes without touching anything. My usual routine, shirt, pants, belt, jacket, felt suddenly foreign, like I was putting on someone else's uniform. My body remembered the blouse from last night. The softness. The way it had changed how I breathed. How I stood. Get a grip, I told myself. I dressed the same as always and drove to work, but something was off. The steering wheel felt too solid under my hands. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked harsher than I remembered. Like the man staring back was trying too hard to stay in place. At the office, everything was louder. The clack of keyboards. The low hum of conversations. The way people looked at me, normal, unknowing, careless. Mark leaned over the cubicle wall. You good, man? You look distracted. Didn't sleep, I replied quickly. It was a lie, but not the whole one. I had slept. Just not peacefully. My dreams were tangled with mirrors and fabric and Lena's voice saying turn around over and over again. During a meeting, I caught myself watching a woman across the table adjust her cardigan, noticing details I never paid attention to before. The drape, the movement, the quiet confidence. A strange ache settled in my chest. What the hell is happening to me? By lunchtime, the pressure inside me was unbearable. I escaped to the restroom, locked myself in a stall, and pressed my palms against my thighs, grounding myself. This was just a game. A one-time thing. It didn't mean anything. But my body didn't believe me. That evening, Lena didn't bring it up. That was worse. She cooked dinner like always, humming softly, moving through the kitchen with ease. Every time she reached for something, I felt hyper-aware of her clothes. The way they fit her, the way they expressed something I'd never allowed myself to even imagine. You're quiet, she said casually, placing a plate in front of me. Long day. She nodded, accepting it, but her eyes lingered on my face a second too long. Like she was reading something between the lines I wasn't saying out loud. After dinner, she disappeared into the bedroom. When she came back, she was holding something folded neatly in her arms. I'm not asking, she said gently. I just want you to think about it. She placed the folded clothes on the couch between us. My chest tightened. A simple outfit. Nothing dramatic. Dark jeans. A soft gray top. Comfortable. Normal. Too normal. I can't, I said immediately. Not again. She sat beside me, close but not touching. Why? Because if I do, I swallowed, I won't be able to pretend it didn't matter. That was the first real truth I'd said out loud. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Finally, she said, you don't have to decide tonight. And she stood up, leaving the clothes behind. I stared at them for a long time after she went to bed. The next few days were torture. At work, I felt like I was walking a tightrope. Every laugh sounded suspicious. Every glance felt loaded. I became painfully aware of how I moved, how stiff, how controlled. At home, the clothes stayed folded on the couch. Waiting. One afternoon, I came home early. Lena wasn't there yet. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I stood in the living room, staring at the folded fabric, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure the neighbors could hear it. Just look, I told myself. I picked up the top. My fingers sank into the fabric and a shiver ran through me. I didn't rush this time. I went to the bedroom, closed the door and undressed slowly, deliberately. When I pulled the jeans on, I paused. This time there was no laughter in my head. No panic. Just awareness. The top slid over my head, resting against my skin like a secret. I exhaled without realizing I'd been holding my breath. I walked to the mirror. The reflection didn't shock me this time. It unsettled me in a different way. I looked softer. Not weaker. Just less armored. My shoulders dropped. My jaw unclenched. I felt my posture change naturally without effort. This feels dangerous, I thought. As it felt good. A sound at the door snapped me back to reality. Keys. Lena was home. I panicked, heart racing, unsure whether to change or stay frozen in place. The door opened. She stopped. We stared at each other. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said quietly, "You didn't run." Something in her voice, pride maybe, made my eyes burn. "I don't know what this means," I said, my voice raw. She stepped closer, careful, like approaching something fragile. "It means you're listening to yourself," she replied. And for the first time I realized the disruption wasn't just in my daily life. It was inside me. After that night, secrecy became my oxygen. Not because Lena demanded it, she didn't, but because I did. I wasn't ready to let this new part of me breathe in daylight yet. It felt fragile. Newborn. Like if I examined it too closely it might disappear. So I waited for moments alone. The house had a different energy when Lena wasn't there. Quieter. Safer. Dangerous in its freedom. The first time I planned it, really planned it, I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread all day at work. My phone buzzed with her text. "Running late. Don't wait up." My stomach flipped. When I got home I didn't even turn on the TV. I stood in the bedroom doorway, staring at her closet like it might stare back. This time I didn't grab the same clothes. I wanted to explore. I slid hangers aside slowly, fingers brushing fabrics I had no business touching. Or so I'd always believed. Cotton. Something soft and stretchy that slipped between my fingers like water. I chose carefully. A light sweater. A pair of leggings. Under things I barely allowed myself to look at before. My hands trembled as I undressed. Every piece of my usual clothing that hit the floor felt like I was shedding armor. My body felt exposed long before I put anything else on. The leggings were a challenge. I had to sit to pull them up, heart hammering as the fabric hugged my legs, clung to me in ways no men's clothing ever had. When they were finally on, I froze. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then I stood. The sensation was overwhelming, not sexual, not exactly, just intimate. Like my body was being acknowledged for the first time instead of hidden. The sweater followed. Soft. Loose. Falling just right. I walked to the mirror slowly, almost afraid of what I'd see. But when my reflection appeared, something unexpected happened. I smiled. It wasn't forced. It wasn't ironic. It was real. I tilted my head. Turned slightly. Watched how the clothes moved with me instead of against me. My posture changed again, hips relaxed, shoulders lowered, movements smaller, more deliberate. Is this who I am when I stop pretending? I wondered. That thought scared me enough to make my chest tighten. I started experimenting in tiny ways. How I walked. How I sat. How I held my hands. I practiced speaking quietly, then a little higher, then softer. Not changing my voice completely, just letting it loosen. It felt awkward at first, like learning a new language with my own mouth. Sometimes I laughed at myself. Sometimes I almost cried. I tried makeup one afternoon, hands clumsy and uncertain. Just a little concealer, mascara. When I leaned close to the mirror, concentrating, I felt focused, present. When I stepped back and looked again, my breath caught. I didn't look like my wife. I looked like me, but rewritten. And that realization hit harder than any fear. The hardest part was undressing afterward. Taking the clothes off felt like saying goodbye to someone who had only just arrived. Folding them carefully, returning them to the closet exactly as I'd found them, felt like putting a secret back into a locked box. At dinner that night, Lena watched me closely. "You seem lighter," she said. I shrugged. "Just tired." She didn't call me out. He never did. But later, as we lay in bed, she reached for my hand and said softly, "You don't have to hide from me." I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding. "I'm not hiding," I whispered. She squeezed my fingers gently. "Yes," she replied. "You are. And that's okay for now." The secret grew with each passing day. I started noticing things I never had before. The way fabrics draped on mannequins. The confidence in the walk of strangers. The quiet power in subtlety. At night, lying next to Lena, my mind replayed moments in front of the mirror. The calm. The rightness. And a question I could no longer ignore whispered louder each time. What happens when this isn't enough anymore? The first time I thought about leaving the house like that, my stomach twisted so hard I thought I might be sick. Not fully dressed like Lena. Not boldly transformed. Just different enough that I would know. The idea lodged itself in my mind and refused to leave. It started small. Harmless, I told myself. One evening, Lena was in the shower. Steam rolled under the bathroom door, filling the bedroom with warmth and white noise. My heart was already racing before I even made the decision. I opened her drawer and chose something subtle. A fitted sweater, darker jeans. Neutral shoes. Nothing loud. Nothing that screamed for attention. Still, my hands shook as I dressed. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a disguise. I saw intention. A quiet choice. Just step outside, I told myself. So I grabbed my keys and froze at the front door. My reflection stared back at me in the hallway mirror. Eyes wide, lips parted, breath shallow. "If anyone sees you," I whispered, "you can always turn back." The door opened. Cool evening air brushed against my face, grounding me. I stepped onto the porch, then the sidewalk, each movement deliberate, measured. Every sound felt amplified. A car passing. A dog barking. Footsteps in the distance. I kept my gaze down at first, heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would give me away. Then something strange happened. Nothing. No gasps. No laughter. No pointing fingers. A woman jogged past me without a second glance. A man walked his dog, nodding politely as he passed. I breathed. Halfway down the block, my shoulders relaxed. My steps softened. My body found a rhythm that felt natural. This is dangerous, I thought. But as I liked it. The next time I went farther. A corner store. Bright lights. People. I stood outside for a full minute, hands clenched in my pockets, arguing with myself. You can still go home. You don't belong here like this. Or maybe you do. I pushed the door open. The bell chimed. Every nerve in my body screamed. I felt exposed under the fluorescent lights, hyper-aware of my posture, my voice, my hands. "Hi," the cashier said casually. My throat tightened. "Hi," I replied, softer than usual but steady. She didn't react. Didn't blink. Just scanned my items and told me the total. That was it. No interrogation. No judgment. As I walked out, receipt in hand, something inside me cracked open. I wasn't invisible, but I wasn't condemned either. I was just there. After that, the line kept moving. Coffee shops. Late night walks. Small errands. Each time fear showed up first, sharp, demanding, but it never stayed long. Confidence crept in quietly, surprising me when I caught my reflection in windows and didn't look away. One afternoon, Lena watched me lace my shoes and tilted her head. "You're walking differently," she said. I froze. "Am I?" She smiled faintly. "Yeah. Like you're not bracing for impact anymore." I didn't know what to say to that. Because she was right. The first real interaction came sooner than I expected. I was standing in line at a cafe when the woman in front of me turned around. "I love your sweater," she said casually. "Where'd you get it?" My brain stalled. For half a second I considered lying. Deflecting. Running. Instead I swallowed and said, "Pie wife's." She laughed softly. "Lucky you. It suits you." Just like that. No hesitation. No confusion. As she turned back around, my hands trembled, not from fear but from adrenaline. From relief. From something dangerously close to pride. I replayed her words all the way home. It suits you. That night I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. I didn't rush. I didn't criticize. I studied myself. The way my eyes looked brighter. The way my body seemed more aligned. Less tense. Less defensive. Thought about my old life. The rules I'd followed without questioning. The narrow version of myself I'd performed so convincingly. And I wondered quietly, honestly, how long have I been waiting for permission to feel like this? Confidence didn't arrive all at once. It crept in quietly, like it was afraid I might scare it away. Started with how I moved through the house. I stopped rushing back into my old clothes the moment Lena walked into a room. I stopped flinching when she looked at me for too long. I even caught myself staying dressed a little longer after errands, sitting on the couch, legs tucked beneath me, feeling comfortable. One Friday evening, Lena leaned against the doorway and watched me sip tea, my fingers curled loosely around the mug. "You look peaceful," she said. The word startled me. "I don't think I've ever been described that way," I replied. She smiled softly. "Maybe because you've never let yourself be." That night something shifted. Not dramatically. No big decision. Just a quiet understanding settling into my bones. This wasn't just about clothes anymore. It was about permission. The next weekend she suggested we go out together. Not late at night. Not somewhere hidden. Just a bookstore cafe across town. My heart started racing instantly. Like, together? "Yes," she said simply. "As you are." I opened my mouth to protest, then closed it. The fear was there, sharp, familiar, but it was different now. It didn't control me the way it used to. I nodded. Getting ready felt ceremonial. I took my time choosing what to wear, aware of Lena watching without interfering. She didn't dress me. She didn't guide me. She let me choose. When I stepped back and looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the man who once stood frozen in front of her closet, shaking with shame. I still felt nervous walking out the door. My pulse still raced. But my spine was straight. My breathing steady. At the cafe we sat side by side, knees brushing. A barista smiled at us, asked for our order, used the same warm tone she used with everyone else. I realized something then. The world wasn't watching me nearly as closely as I'd feared. Most people were too busy living their own lives. A woman at the next table struck up a conversation about the book I was holding. I answered without overthinking, my voice, my hands, my posture. I just spoke. And it was fine. Better than fine. On the drive home, Lena reached over and squeezed my thigh gently. "You were glowing," she said. I laughed nervously. I was terrified. "I know," she replied. "That's why it mattered." That night, alone in the bathroom, I stared at myself for a long time. Not searching for flaws. Not bracing for judgment. Just looking. I saw someone learning how to take up space differently. Someone softer, yes, but also stronger in a way I'd never allowed myself to be. And for the first time, I admitted something I'd never dared to say, even in my own head. I didn't want this to stop. I woke up the next morning with a knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with fear. It was anticipation. That realization unsettled me more than anything else so far. At work, the walls felt closer. Conversations sounded sharper. I became acutely aware of how carefully I'd been balancing two versions of myself. One confident and expanding at home, the other rigid and rehearsed here. During a team meeting, my manager glanced at me longer than usual. Not suspiciously. Thoughtfully. "Everything okay?" she asked after everyone else filed out. "Yes," I answered too quickly. She nodded, unconvinced but not pressing. "If you need flexibility, let me know." I thanked her and walked away with my heart pounding. Not because she knew, but because she might someday. The truth was pressing outward now. It wasn't content staying hidden anymore. That evening, Lena and I were halfway through dinner when my phone buzzed. A message from my sister. "Can we talk? It's about something I saw." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "What's wrong?" Lena asked instantly. I handed her the phone. She read the message slowly, then looked up at me. Her expression wasn't alarmed. It was steady. Supportive. "Ready." "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow," I said quietly. "She wants to come over." Sleep didn't come easily that night. My mind ran through 1,000 scenarios. Questions, judgments, misunderstandings. I practiced explanations in my head that sounded hollow the moment I imagined saying them out loud. The next afternoon, my sister stood in our living room, arms crossed, eyes scanning me in a way that made my skin prickle. She took a breath. "I saw you last week. At the cafe." I nodded. My throat was too tight to speak. "At first, I thought I was mistaken," she continued. "But then I wasn't." Silence stretched between us. Finally, I said, "I'm not confused. I'm not being forced. And I'm not broken." She studied my face carefully. "Are you happy?" The simplicity of the question caught me off guard. No accusation. No mockery. "Yes," I said, surprised by how solid the word felt. She exhaled slowly. "Then I need time. But I don't need to walk away." My knees nearly gave out. After she left, I sat down heavily, hands shaking. Lena sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "You chose yourself," she said softly. "That's why it was scary." That night, as I stood in front of the mirror, I felt something new beneath the nerves and vulnerability. Resolve. I couldn't keep living in halves. I didn't want to. I wanted a life where my reflection didn't feel like a secret. And for the first time, I wasn't asking whether I was allowed to want that. I was deciding that I did. The next step didn't come with fireworks or a dramatic announcement. It came quietly, the way most real decisions do. I stood in the bedroom one morning, sunlight spilling across the floor, and realized I was tired of changing who I was depending on where I stood. Tired of rehearsing myself. Tired of shrinking. Lena watched me from the bed as I got dressed, her expression unreadable but calm. "You don't have to do anything today," she said. "You know that, right?" "I know," I replied. But my hands didn't reach for my old clothes. They reached for what felt right. When we walked out the door together, my heart still raced, but it wasn't panic anymore. It was something closer to purpose. Every step felt deliberate. Claimed. At work, I asked for a private meeting. My voice shook only once, and I didn't apologize for it. I spoke plainly. I didn't over-explain. I didn't beg for understanding. I just told the truth. There was a pause afterward that felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Then my manager nodded. "Thank you for trusting me with that," she said. "We'll figure this out." Walking out of her office, my legs felt weak, but my chest felt light. The weeks that followed weren't perfect. Some people needed distance. Some needed time. A few surprised me in ways I hadn't expected. Small smiles, quiet acceptance, casual conversations that told me I wasn't alone. And some days were still hard. But none of them were empty anymore. At home, Lena and I talked more honestly than we ever had. About fear. About desire. About how love isn't about control, it's about making space. One night, she leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "I didn't make you dress like me." I smiled softly. "No. You just showed me I didn't have to hide." Now, when I look in the mirror, I don't search for permission or approval. I see someone who chose truth over comfort. Someone who learned that softness and strength aren't opposites. Someone who finally stepped into their life instead of watching it from the sidelines. If you're listening to this and you're standing at the edge of your own quiet truth, terrified of what might happen if you take one step forward, let me tell you something I learned the hard way. The scariest moment isn't when the world sees you. It's the moment you realize you've been ready all along. And choosing yourself, that's not the end of the story. It's where it finally begins. I used to think courage was loud. A declaration. A breaking point. I was wrong. Courage was standing in front of the mirror and not looking away. It was letting myself feel joy without immediately punishing myself for it. It was accepting that the part of me I'd buried wasn't a flaw. It was a truth waiting patiently to be acknowledged. My wife didn't change who I was. She gave me the safety to discover it. And in doing so, she taught me something I wish I'd learned years earlier. Love isn't about fitting into someone else's shape. It's about being seen clearly and still being held. If you're watching this and carrying a secret that feels too heavy to speak, know this: you are not late. You are not broken. You are not alone. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is let yourself become who you've always been. And sometimes, that single act of honesty can change everything. Time passed. Not in a dramatic montage kind of way, but in mornings and routines and small ordinary moments that slowly proved I hadn't imagined any of it. I learned what days felt like when I wasn't at war with myself. How my body relaxed when I stopped policing every movement. How laughter came easier when I wasn't measuring it against who I thought I was supposed to be. There were still hard conversations. Still awkward silences. Still moments where old instincts tried to drag me back into hiding. But something fundamental had changed. I didn't collapse anymore when fear showed up. I stood. Lena and I grew closer in ways I never expected. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was honest. We talked about boundaries. About attraction. About how identity doesn't steal love when it's handled with care. It deepens it. One night, months later, we sat on the couch, legs tangled, the house quiet around us. She traced slow circles on my arm and said, "You know, I fell in love with you twice." I turned to her. "Twice." She nodded. "Once with who you were pretending to be. And once with who you actually are." That stayed with me. I stopped thinking of my past self with anger. He wasn't weak. He was surviving the only way he knew how. He was waiting for safety. Waiting for permission. Waiting for someone to say, "You don't have to disappear to be loved." And when that permission finally came, from her, from myself, I stepped forward instead of shrinking. So if this story sounds familiar, if something in your chest tightens because you recognize yourself in my hesitation, my fear, my quiet longing, listen to me. You don't need to rush. You don't need to perform. You don't need to explain yourself to the world all at once. But you do deserve a life where your reflection doesn't feel like a lie. Sometimes transformation doesn't start with rebellion or escape. Sometimes it starts with someone you trust handing you a piece of fabric and asking you gently to be honest. And if you let yourself answer that question, really answer it, you might discover that becoming yourself isn't the thing that breaks your life. It's the thing that finally lets it begin.